By now, you probably know who James Gunn is, but if not, he directed this, and this,
I'm very popular, y'all,
and this. Marvel and DC have made him a household name, but Gunn has had quite the journey to reach that point, because before that, he was better known for directing things like this,
what the f was that?
And this. That's just directing though. Gunn has been a prolific writer since getting into movies. He has written every movie he's directed, along with the Dawn of the Dead remake, the Scooby-Doo live-action films, and Romeo and Juliet, which I can't show any scene from. But among all this, he wrote a single video game back in 2012, 2 years before truly breaking out with Guardians of the Galaxy, Lollipop Chainsaw. This game was a hell of a collaborative effort, as it was written by Gunn, directed by Suda51, composed by Akira Yamaoka of Silent Hill fame, along with Little Jimmy Urine of the cult electropunk band Mindless Self-Indulgence. It also served as a major kicking off point for Jessica Nigri, who cosplayed the main character of Juliet at various trade shows. And yet, it's never really brought up in conversation anymore, which is honestly a shame because this game is a fascinating look at many of the hallmarks that have become staples of Gunn's career. So let's do just that and see what Lollipop Chainsaw is all about. Now, normally I'd focus on the story first, but that's kind of the key point of this whole video. Instead, it's better to cover just what kind of game Lollipop Chainsaw is. And in that respect, it's nothing too out of the ordinary. You are cast as a high school girl who must fight a horde of invading zombies in a third-person action game. She's equipped with a chainsaw that can be integrated with standard punches and kicks in order to pull off powerful combos. However, a zombie can't be defeated until its head is removed, and this is easily done when the zombie is dazed, and that's where those normal attacks come in. As she progresses, new abilities will be automatically given at key points. Killing zombies and exploring both grant money that can be spent at a shop to increase her stats, or unlock new combos to clear out the undead horde. If 3 or more zombies are killed in a single chainsaw swing, then special silver coins are awarded, which are used to unlock new costumes, music, and artwork. While the gameplay couldn't be considered on the level of a Devil May Cry or Bayonetta, it feels akin to No More Heroes in its combat style. There's more to it than the basics I've outlined here, but on the whole, the gameplay is kept simple yet just interesting enough to keep me engrossed throughout its runtime. And a lot of that comes down to its style, as it absolutely elevates the core game. There's a cheekiness that exudes from Lollipop Chainsaw as soon as it begins. Juliet Starling is narrating about her life, quickly introducing herself, her family, and her boyfriend while showcasing her eccentricities. It's a big day for her, as not only is it her 18th birthday, but her boyfriend is supposed to meet her family for the first time. And in these 2 minutes of narration, it's amazing how immediately the audience gets her character. She's cheerful, a bit naive, and has some kind of secret as evidenced by her training and the oddities concerning her sisters. Then, of course, the zombies appear. It's not long before she reveals her chainsaw and her fighting prowess as she battles through the hordes of undead students to reach her boyfriend, Nick. While she does reach him in time, he sacrifices himself to save her from a zombie and ends up getting bitten. The two share declarations of love in a cheesy teenage way, although Juliet says hers as she raises her chainsaw above her head, bringing it down on Nick's neck. It turns out she used a special ritual to keep his head alive, and now the decapitated appendage adorns her skirt like a keychain. It's absolutely ridiculous, but what works about this is Juliet and Nick themselves. Even though we're the ones to play Juliet, we identify more with Nick. This is a weird setup, and his girlfriend hid the fact that she was a zombie hunter because she didn't want him to think she was weird. It's through Nick that players learn more about this world, but it's through Juliet that we conquer it. She is powerful and confident throughout the entire story, even when tragic things happen. There's an unflappable energy to her that makes it fun to mow through packs of zombies. Really, it comes down to a simple fact. Nick is who we'd likely be, while Juliet is who we want to be. And this dynamic really comes into focus as the game plays out. It's played for humor, but Nick becomes more and more despondent with each level, especially as he meets each member of Juliet's family. They're amused at him being a talking head, but none of them respect him, and his opinion is never taken into account. He's a literal accessory, but he can't get Juliet to understand that. She loves him too much to let him go, even though he's wishing for death by the end. So it's appropriate that the final level sees them at odds with one another, and the final piece of gameplay is Juliet accepting that Nick has to make a choice and go along with that choice. I won't say how it turns out, but it's surprisingly poignant when looked at through that angle, especially when most of the game has the veneer of crazy characters, insane violence, and juvenile humor. It can get lost, but it is there, and on purpose, as evidenced by Gunn's later works. He pulls the same trick in both Guardians movies, The Suicide Squad, and Peacemaker. The rest of the story is rather standard in comparison, as Juliet discovers that a bullied goth student is behind the zombie attack. In addition to the plague, powerful zombies known as the Dark Purveyors also appear to take over the entire town. Juliet must defeat all 5 to put an end to the chaos. There's not much more to it, but they do provide a lot of variety as each one is themed to a different musical styling. It feeds into the pop-punk aesthetic, and many of them are wild and kind of grotesque in execution. But how much of Gunn is actually in Lollipop Chainsaw? As I played through it, I kept noting elements that felt like his stamp. It was an experience I didn't have when I first played the game 10 years ago, mainly because I had no idea who Gunn was. Now that I know his style, it's exuded from almost every aspect of the presentation. I already mentioned the story and theme, but the humor, the music, and even the actors are hallmarks of his projects. This feels entirely unique as it's rare to have a writer stand out this much in a game. Usually that comes more from the creative director. You know when you're playing a game from Kojima, from Miyamoto, or from Suda51. And gameplay-wise, this does feel like a Suda game. It has his stylings, and Juliet's weightiness is akin to Travis Touchdown. And this makes sense, as Suda was the one to approach James Gunn with the idea. Gunn says he was instantly attracted to the mixture of the sweetness and the profane. To him, it's a relationship story with Romeo and Juliet as the motif. Nick and Juliet may not be star-crossed lovers, but they have their own obstacles to overcome. That instant connection is the reason there's so much of Gunn in Lollipop Chainsaw. Originally, he was only going to write and direct the cutscenes, but the more he got involved, the more he wanted to do it all. It's a sign of passion from him, repeated with the Peacemaker television series. As he took on more responsibilities, the more he fell in love with the characters. He stated across multiple interviews that he found it freeing to think up all the vocal reactions and the world itself, despite the fact that it was way bigger than a typical movie script. That said, he was only responsible for the story and character beats. During meetings, he would confirm whether the characters were looking right, acting right, and that the scenes played out right. Anything directly involved with the gameplay, he had no input on, which makes sense. That's not his area of expertise. But his influence on every other aspect of the project was notable, even down to the actors. Early into development, he told Warner Bros. Interactive that he wanted to get some of his friends in it. They initially disbelieved him because it wouldn't pay much, but he came through on that promise. Michael Rosenbaum, who played Lex Luthor on Smallville, was cast as Nick, as the two were good friends. Rosenbaum would even get a role in Guardians of the Galaxy 2 as Martinex, one of Yondu's old friends. And speaking of Yondu, his actor, Michael Rooker, who has been in almost all of Gunn's movies, played Vic the Viking, one of the Dark Purveyors. Greg Henry, another notable actor that appeared in most of Gunn's movies, was cast as Juliet's father. The other big recurring actor of Gunn's is his brother Sean, who did the mocap for Rocket Raccoon in Guardians and Weasel in the Suicide Squad. In Lollipop Chainsaw, he's the main villain, Swan. One of the only actors he didn't have a connection with beforehand was Tara Strong, who voiced Juliet. But even that has a strange connection to his future work. Juliet, in some respects, feels like a more sane Harley Quinn. Ironic because Strong had taken over the role of Harley the year before in Batman Arkham City. And of course, Gunn would write for Harley herself in the Suicide Squad. Notably, Gunn admitted in an interview that the Harley sequence in the movie was inspired by Lollipop Chainsaw's rainbow lace decapitations. There is one aspect of the game that I was unable to confirm in terms of Gunn's influence, but his fingerprints are all over it: the soundtrack. Akira Yamaoka may have crafted most of the original music, but Lollipop Chainsaw is filled with licensed songs. Cherry Bomb from Joan Jett plays in the main menu, Lollipop from the Chordettes can be heard every time when shopping, Pac-Man Fever by Buckner and Garcia plays during the arcade-themed level, and You Spin Me Round by Dead or Alive fills the air when mowing down zombies in a combine. There's 16 in total, enough to create an entire album, and they feel reminiscent of Gunn's awesome mixes in the Guardians movies, as well as the various needle drops in the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker. Again, I couldn't get confirmation that it was him that chose the songs, but I wouldn't be surprised if he at least had some say in their selection. At the very least, I know that it was his encouragement that got Mindless Self-Indulgence's Little Jimmy Urine on the project. Gunn often hung out with him and thought he'd be a perfect fit for the punk rock dark purveyor, Zed, despite him never acting before. Warner Brothers actually encouraged the idea, as the original concepts for Zed didn't look like an American punk rocker, and sent pictures of Jimmy Urine as reference material. Ultimately, he ended up creating all the boss music in Lollipop Chainsaw, as his eclectic sounds fit the different musical stylings of each dark purveyor extremely well. As someone who has listened to Mindless Self-Indulgence, the songs aren't as bold as his album work, but they do work better for a mainstream audience. If you're familiar with James Gunn's work at all, Lollipop Chainsaw does feel like a passion project of his. His signature is all over every aspect of the presentation, and it makes the game more than just a surface level oddity of seeing rainbows and zombies on the screen at the same time. It's also amusing in retrospect that the game was released 2 months before he entered talks to direct Guardians of the Galaxy, which is what made him a much more well-known name. So many interviews asked what he'd be doing next, but he stayed coy the entire time, saying that there were so many projects put on his desk. Of course, he did always wish he could work on a comic book. Guess you could say that one worked out. Lollipop Chainsaw may be mostly forgotten now, but it isn't completely. James Gunn, Tara Strong, and Suda all celebrated the 10th anniversary, and there's even potential rumblings of a re-release. If it does happen, I'd say it's worth picking up. It's rough around the edges, but the punk spirit makes it so much fun, and it serves as a great time capsule. But how much of this did you already know? Have you played Lollipop Chainsaw? Let me know in the comments, and as always, please consider subscribing to Good Vibes Gaming, hitting the like button, and ringing that bell. We also have a Patreon at patreon.com/gvgaming with plenty of extra perks. Until next time, bye!